Okay, guys, here we are. And I'm actually on time. Beautiful. I have my friend Ron Jackson here, who is the leader of the domain name industry. He's been around since the beginning. He knows everybody and everything. He's the editor of Domain Name Journal at dnjournal.com, which I encourage you all to subscribe to, read, and participate. You can blog on the bottom of it. And anyway, Ron was here a few weeks ago, which was an awesome. I interviewed him, and this time he's going to interview me. So here is my buddy Ron. Morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. Good to see you again.
It's my pleasure. How's Diana?
Diana's doing great. I probably should give some folks some background on this. As you mentioned, we talked a few weeks ago, and at the time, I thought, since you started doing your streams, there are a lot of new people who are discovering you. Anyone who's been in this industry for any period of time already knows you. They know your background, but I'm thinking you just finished doing your 20th show. So I suggested to you, when you reach a landmark like that along the way, let me come in, flip the tables on you. And for those folks who don't know your background, which is pretty fascinating, I thought we could let them know about that, how you rose to prominence in the domain industry. Everyone came here from a different path. So, and my point on that is that it's probably my favorite thing about the business is looking back at all these directions people came in from, because domaining in the 1990s was an entirely new thing. There are very few like kids who discovered it and started it. Mostly it was people who were already in business, and they came here from some other location. So I want to ask you about that, particularly since your start involved when you were around 15 years old. And incidentally, a lot of this information comes from a cover story I did on Mike back in 2003. When he was one of my first cover story subjects at DN Journal. In fact, I want to thank you for that, because I was just starting out. You said I was there at the beginning, but you were well established several years before I came along. So when I came in as a nobody, it was so helpful to DN Journal when people like yourself and some of the other pioneers of the industry agreed to be profiled and share your story with others. So I think you had a lot to do with helping me get off the ground, and I've never forgotten that. So anyhow, I remember back then you told me that I'm not sure runaway is the right word, so let me say it this way. You left home when you were 15 years old and you didn't tell your parents. So generally that probably would fit the description. You grew up in Washington, D.C., and you took off and went all the way.
I did tell them.
You what? Oh, you did
tell them, but...
Okay, I thought you didn't even bother to tell them. So I
didn't tell them where I was going, but I did tell them I was leaving.
Okay, well, it's 50-50.
I'm just kidding.
You wound up as far away as you could get, all the way out in California and Santa Barbara. So tell me, what was the motivation from leaving at that young age? And basically, you were on your own from that point on.
Well, I got in a ton of trouble, basically. And the interesting thing is back then, though, they had these promotional flights on People's Express for $99 across country. And this is way before 9/11, like extremely before. But you didn't need any ID. You needed a name. And I think they actually did card me, but I just said I didn't have my ID. I had a fake name. I had $99. And so I arrived at the airport in Los Angeles with, my backpack and my normal deadhead attire. And so, yeah, that was the beginning of the rest of the journey right there.
I used to spend a lot of time in LA 70s and 80s when I had record stores. I would go out there to buy collectibles from people in the record companies. How is it that you arrived in LA, but why did you go on up to Santa Barbara a couple hours north?
I actually ended up in Santa Cruz. I ended up in Santa Barbara, where I went to Santa Barbara City College. So I actually came back and forth across country a few times. And I did end up in Santa Barbara when I was older, slightly older. I went to Santa Barbara City College, and I got an AA in business management. And then a couple times after that, I moved back to California on and off to Santa Monica.
Yeah. Now you wound up going back to Washington, D.C. and started an entrepreneurial career. One of the things you told me back then is you ran a pretzel company, was one of the first things you did. You had a bicycle messenger service. The first thing that really connected, though, 1994, you started an internet service provider, Internet Interstate. And I wonder how you made that leap from some of your earlier ventures onto the internet, which was then just getting started.
Yeah, well, again, I'm kind of agnostic about the whole thing. I actually mostly was trying to make money to service my charity work and pay myself also. But, I had these ideas regarding operating charities and charity work. And it's just not a profitable thing. You can't, if you're working for somebody else in the charity world, you're getting paid very little. So the only way to really do what I wanted to do was to make money. Nobody was going to give me any. I wasn't going to inherit any. I wasn't going to get some great job. And I always tell people that, I could never hold a job because I'd be fired the first day for being tardy and insubordinate. So it would be all over with.
Well, Internet Interstate, actually, to your point, that's actually exactly what led you into a huge involvement in charity. You had a big success there, and Vario came along in 1998 and bought your company in a 7-figure deal. Now you, for the first time, really had a lot of capital, and you really started pouring a lot of efforts into charity work then. I know you've written books on the subject as well. I think the first one may not have been the first one, but a big one you were part of was an organization called Bite Back that you were chairman of for 3 years. And I thought that was very interesting, what the work that you did with that organization. Tell us about that.
That organization still exists, and they're doing an incredible job in Washington, D.C. So it's amazing they've actually persisted so long and had several changes of leadership since I was there in the beginning stages. But it's a really great organization that has computer training centers in the inner city and churches and homeless service centers and places like that where people, need a break. It's all free. So people go in and get free computer training. They get help with their resumes and their clothing and all sorts of different stuff. It's all operated by volunteers and by donations and things like that. It's actually a great model that, we might work on something similar. We're doing a lot of stuff with Sean Randolph and myself here in South Florida. I do want to just back you up one step for how I ended up doing internet work. And the answer is I was just hanging out in the library trying to figure out how to make money, just reading business magazines. This was before I was on the internet. So reading business magazines, reading newspapers, reading business books, just studying, how can I make money? How can I make money? And there was this repetitive theme that I remember the first couple of times I read it, I think it was in Newsweek the first time. There's this thing called the internet. And one day, all the newspapers are going to be on there, and you're going to buy, your food on there and get your food delivered. And you started seeing articles like this, like 20 something years ago. I'm like, I guess it was like 30 years ago at this point. And just like, are you kidding me? This is crazy. And you kept reading about it. You're like, oh yeah, there are all these billionaires are going to be created from this thing called the internet. I'm like, what the hell? So in any case, I just decided, okay, I'm on the internet. I'm the internet guy. I'm going to be the best internet guy. Keeping in mind, I had no interest in technology, and I still don't really. I just hired people. So somebody showed me, the basics of getting on a bulletin board, BBS. I put an advertisement on dc.jobs, BBS. And in Washington, D.C., there are all these young kids from all over the world going to like George Washington University, American University. Most of them don't have any papers, and they have all kinds of skills, though, all kinds of different people with all sorts of skills. So basically, it's a rudimentary version of what I do today is I hire a bunch of smart young people, and I gather them together and try to produce these little businesses, basically.
That's very interesting. And it's very interesting. One thing that makes you very unique among people that I know when you're in that age range, so you're in your 20s. And a lot of us at that age, we're thinking about making money, but I knew very few at that point in their lives who were already thinking and so dedicated to the idea of doing charity work. That's a very rare quality. Generally, it takes some time, particularly for guys, to mature. You want to run around, spend money on cars and apartments and clothes and houses. What was it innately about you that drew you into wanting to make that really the focus of your life and where you're going to take the fruits of your labor and put them?
Well, a lot of stuff happened early on. Basically, you talked about when I was a runaway. So when I was a runaway, I was, among the common people, like homeless people and, substance abusers and crazy people and whoever else happened to be around, people of all ethnicities, for example. So, so in any event, I never really actually had any other ideas other than to do, I like doing business stuff, but the idea has always been about, producing some service or playing music, but it's, doing good stuff in the world, for the world, having a good time, meeting nice people, whatever. So all the business stuff that I ended up spending 90% of my time on was meant to not take so much time and is meant to finance the other work. But I think the point is, especially we can bring it to the present, is my charity work is going extremely well and my business work is going extremely well. So I'm on the exact same path, and you'll see myself and my team do a ton of really great stuff like we're already doing. It's more and more scale.
Well, okay, now let's talk about domains more specifically. After Vario bought Internet Interstate, it wasn't too long after that you founded Buy Domains. And Buy Domains, when I came along in the start of 2002, was already like a huge, it's almost like a vacuum cleaner that was vacuuming up every good domain as they expired. So how did you make this step from being an ISP provider to recognizing domains as an investment and creating a platform for buying and selling domains? That would be one, how you got that interest there, and then how you became so dominant in that space, and really not very long after you started it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, the beginning is that I owned menus.com from my days before that. I owned an internet service provider. You mentioned Internet Interstate, and we had a web development department. And so we had bought, a couple dozen domains that we were trying to use as bait to bring in clients. So I was trying to, I owned menus.com domain name because I wanted to bring in, the National Restaurant Association. I was trying to get them to pay me, which they didn't do.
Right.
But regardless, the same point, I owned realtors.org that I was trying to get the National Real Estate Association to become my client. So I just owned all these great domains, government.net. I probably own a couple still from that first batch.
Did you buy those?
Congressional.com.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you buy those domains of such high quality? Did you have to pay a premium and buy them from an owner, or were those available as hand registrations back then? And we're talking about the mid-90s, I think, here.
Yeah, well, you had to do some very tricky stuff, of course. Well, you had to be first in line is the most important thing. You had to send in a mailed certificate to San Diego to Internet and send in maybe $50 or something. But aside from that, there was all these sort of abandoned domain names out there that, you had to send in whatever kind of BS paperwork. Plus, you were only allowed to register one domain per physical snail mail address. So you had to have all your friends and family and everybody use all these different addresses so you could register. In order to have 20 domains, I needed 20 snail mail addresses. That's why you couldn't collect millions or however many. So the whole system constantly kept changing, as you know, obviously. So in any event, I owned menus.com. Somebody offered me $25,000 for it, and I'd paid $70 through Internet. And I was like, man, this is incredible. And I said, okay. And then the next day, somebody offered me $50,000 for the same name. I don't know if they knew each other. I don't know the backstory, but unfortunately, I was already committed to the first guy. But, I'd say, that's the light bulb is, man, these things are worth a fortune. And so then probably the next day, most likely, I called my friend Ron Fitzherbert, who's a real hacker, like the real deal, who knows one of these guys I told you about from DC, who seriously knows the stuff. They built the original internet framework, basically, in DC for whichever companies, MCI and whoever, all these companies were from DC, the Pentagon, etc. So in any event, I told him to write software that would help me find these domain names and register them quickly, because I couldn't sit there and do them one at a time. I was going crazy. I was doing it one at a time for a couple of weeks, thinking up, I remember one of my first ones I actually did in my head was ventureinvesting.com. Probably took me 10 years, but I eventually sold it for probably $10,000 or something. So that was, again, a hand registration from my head, but moving forward is all software driven. So, we're still redoing and improving the software, and we have to fight the system that has their own software and people and hackers, and it's a convoluted system of BS.
Yeah. Well, buy domains really became just a colossus, and it ended up attracting a buyer. I remember reporting when you sold buy domains to Name Media. They were subject to an NDA back then. People were floating pricing around like it might have been an $80 million deal. I don't suppose I could get you to confirm or deny or say that's in the ballpark on what, because that's never come out to my knowledge.
There's a lot of articles about it. I mean, a ton of people posted about it. So I don't really care. It's pretty sure it's past the statute of limitations by now.
Does 80 million sound right? Is that ballpark?
Yeah, that's pretty close. I got some stock also. And it's not just me. It's my whole team,
right?
The IRS, my exes, it was shared. Right. And really, my charity fund, which is doing great right now with the rise of the stock market, was a major beneficiary.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in those days, other than not being able to compete with you to get a domain, was that you've always been a .com guy and emphasized the value of those. But one thing that you really, buy domains had a lot of, there's one of your great names right there, phone.com. But you had a ton of really great .net and .org domains that you got up. I could see your interest in .org from charity work, and .net, of course, is tied into networks, and you ran an ISP. But was that, what was behind your conscious decision when then a lot of people were only chasing .coms to get the great nets and orgs while you were at it?
Well, the nets were strictly for investment purposes. I was getting them for very cheap. And, they looked like very good quality ones. I was only trying to buy the best ones for a very low price. So it's just, my typical strategy. And I was trying to do the same thing with the .orgs, but the difference is I could use and keep those because I used to run my own charity, grassroots.org, where we had hundreds of members and a bunch of affiliated websites. So we were using the domains for a lot of different purposes, the .org domains, and just the best ones in the world, really.
Right.
Relief.org.
Right. Now, after you sold buy domains, now you're still involved, of course, in buying and selling. And now you have a new, not really new now, but a couple of years ago, you rolled out domainmarket.com.
Yeah, 12 years ago, but who's counting?
Has Domain Market been 12 years? Seriously?
Well, I wish it hasn't been. It was only supposed to be a couple of years, but
to me, did you only start is it mostly it's a home for your own portfolio? You're not having third parties.
We lost a lot of years. I'm sorry to tell you, Ron.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they go by quickly, but that's really scary when you start thinking something was 12 years ago.
It's sad. I like to say 5 and 10, but if I actually do real math.
Right. Let me ask you another thing I've always been curious about. And it came up again here where Rick Schwartz was telling this story just this week about selling GoBet.com, and his first offer was $70,000, and he just said no. And the guy, it goes up to 100, 200, 300, 500,000. I don't know how he says no to 500,000, but he does. He
Seriously.
Yeah, ends up selling it for 850,000. How about you? Now you have, How about
me? I'm totally screwed. I can't do that. Nobody else can do that.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering how much you have your list prices, and you might be, say, $29,888. I always wondered, do you negotiate much off of? I know you don't want to let potential buyers know how much you're going to come down.
Well, how many potential buyers are watching? They can get it. They should be watching if they're smart. They get the inside tips. But
right.
The answer is that we usually discount like 15% if the people are harassing us, and then sometimes I have them priced too high by accident, so I might give more leverage, or if I need to pay my bills at the end of the month or something.
I know you had hit 1,000 domains at one point, and
yeah, we're pretty close to that. We probably have about 320 at the moment.
Are you still running software to acquire them and still building them, or is it kind of like a relatively stable number of domains that you're at now?
It's like a lot of stopping and starting. I'm trying to buy a lot more, but I need a lot of capital. Obviously buying 350,000 domains on auction and then renewing them every month starts adding up. Plus I have, obviously my staff, and it's just a very expensive enterprise.
Are you still, you did ComNet.org, and I know you haven't been a huge fan of the TLDs, but what are your thoughts on, as investments, new TLDs and also CCTLDs?
Well, it's so hard to make a profit on .com, and there's so many millions of .coms that are tradable. There's no reason why you would go down a level and look at that other stuff. But having said that, there's a ton of good quality ones, but it's still a tiny percentage of them. There's a lot of numbers, there's hundreds and thousands of good names in those other spaces. Like, again, I own oil.co, oilco, gas.co, creditcards.co, just for example. Those are columbia.co. And so at that level, if you're going to get the very best ones in those other spaces, but there aren't that many of the best ones. And ultimately, I already own all these. As far as new investments I'm doing, I'm strictly .com. I haven't bought any of those other things for years. Mm-hmm. I still own some of the best stuff. There's no reason to delete it because they're great. And I'm not saying people should not invest in the best of those, but there aren't that many of the best. And there's not really, there's so many domains out there, and it's so hard to make a profit. You need to build a huge filter just to look at the best stuff. And then once you're looking at the best stuff, you got to get the best prices out of it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going down a money pit, like a Bitcoin money pit.
Yeah. We're coming off of a really crazy year here with COVID-19. And it's kind of been, I've seen kind of a roller coaster of impressions among people about how this was going to affect things. When it first started in the US around March, I kind of had a sinking feeling that we're, going to go back to like the Great Recession. Money's going to be tight, and it could be really a bad situation. But within a quarter, the conversation shifted to where people, I think Andrew Rosner was the first one I started talking about. It was, man, this demand for domains is starting to go crazy. And then it kind of dawned on everyone, well, yeah, because people can't do business face-to-face very easily anymore. And all of a sudden, it's been like a stampede online. It's dawned on a lot of people. Only about 50% of businesses had websites as of last year, the last stats I read. So all of a sudden, they're realizing they'd gotten by without one. But now, if I don't have one, maybe my business doesn't survive. It's the only chance I've got. So a lot of this is anecdotal. I haven't seen a lot of the hard evidence, but most people tell me their sales are up considerably. What has your experience been as a guy who's got this one of the greatest, most and broadest portfolios in the world with respect to your sales?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, when nobody's transacting anything and everybody's confused, the sales went all the way down practically to zero. So my expenses remain the same. I had the same staff, same domain renewals, same domain purchases, basically, although the auctions got a tiny bit cheaper, but not much. So that's at the beginning, but then people realize, hey, the economy's all going online. So you see a little surge, the economy going online due to everybody staying home in quarantine. People are starting businesses at home. On the other hand, then people realize the economy's kind of screwed here. Everybody's stuck at home. Nobody has money. So again, it's fluctuating a lot. And then the government, free money, free money, free money. So that, again, that puts a little more. So basically, you'd see the stopping and starting. Ultimately, when you calculate the end of the year, we were a tiny bit behind the year before, nothing substantial. And then presumably, it's still a digital economy, and the whole globe is a digital economy. Presumably, again, people, if they have alternative domains, whatever it might be, they would want to protect themselves with the .com of the same prefix.
Right.
And again, new companies should be starting around the world, especially in America. People want to work at home. There's not as much of a traditional office for life corporate structure to protect you. So you're better off starting your own company. even if your company's not an online business, it has to have some sort of online marketing component and social component. So everybody has some sort of online business. At the very least, they have some sort of directory listing or something.
Right.
So every company has an online component. They're better served by getting a domain. Their best bet is to get the best domain. And so therefore, domain names, again, all I ever promote is the type I buy, which is theverybest.com. Everything else is theverybest.com are too speculative. Like, it's hard to pay the bills. Everything else is so speculative that you shouldn't do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's where we're at.
Yeah. So it is really critical for you to be selling domains. So let's talk about selling. I got every week, and I just had one yesterday, I get an email from someone who says, I poured a ton of money in this. I bought all these domains and I have had like no sales. Usually it's because they're this really horrible domain names. Sometimes they look serviceable or whatever. But there's always been a debate about, with respect to selling. Do you put them out there and try to get an offer and negotiate? Do you do the buy it now? And I've been reading for the last couple of years, all of the selling platforms encourage you to put a buy it now price. And I was kind of just thought, well, of course they want transactions they're going to make money from. But there was always that fear in the back of my head. Maybe you're leaving, a lot of money on the table. If you just put it out there to buy it now, maybe you misprice it. But they said the sell-through rate could be 3 times higher. So for me this year, I took everything under about $5,000 retail. I priced all of it, and I don't even accept any offers. I just put it out at that price, and I would have been stunned in the last year. My sales have indeed gone up about 3 times, and they're selling at what I asked for. And it's stuff that if I made a mistake, can't be a big mistake if you're selling, say, in the 1,000 to 5,000 range. So
it could be a big mistake, actually. Hopefully it's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could sell a $5,000 name for $1,000, but generally,
it's not that. It might actually be worth $500,000.
Well, yeah, that's true. I doubt that I've made that been that far off the mark, but it's possible. I mean, that has happened. There's kind of a rarity. What the point that I'm getting to is for you. And another thing, I've never done outbound at all. I figure people come and look for a name. I think the landing page is really important so they know that it's for sale. So regarding selling, obviously you've got domain market, but I know you also list your domains like at Afterneck and Cedo. So you get it out in front of as many people as you can. So what advice do you have, or what's the approach that you take with regard to selling in general?
Well, luckily, the GoDaddy and Cedo network, mostly GoDaddy, does most of it for me, because that's the whole thing about pricing. If you price it, first you have to have a contract with them, obviously, but if you price the name, it goes into this syndication network because it'll get sent out to 1,000 of their business partners or however many, I'm just making it up, through syndication. If you don't price it, whether it goes through that network or not, nobody can buy it. I mean, you could send it through with no price. I don't even think they send it through if there's no price, but let's pretend they did send it through the syndication network with no price. People all over the world are looking at it, but they can't buy it because they don't have a price.
Right.
Put a price on it, it becomes like Amazon. Buy now, bam, and then it gets fed through the system and I get paid.
Right.
So that's what you did, whether you did it or not,
Right. It's true. And also the thing I think in the pandemic had a lot to do with this. I wasn't traveling anywhere, doing anything, and I started just sitting there rethinking things. I go, like most people, I was only selling 1% to 2% of the domains a year. And I go, it seems like there'd be some way you could accelerate that in some way. So I had that time on my hands, and so that's why I decided to do it. And I was just really shocked. And I'd also gotten to the point after what is like almost 20 years, when you do it, make offer, and invariably the offer is like, it's like everyone on earth agreed to make $200. That's what the offer is going to be. That's $100,000 name or.
Well, it's actually inflation. They used to do $50. Now they do $200. That's pretty good.
That's the first number.
For a $500,000 domain, they give you a $200 offer.
Exactly. That was $50 was the first number I was going to throw out. And then I said, then I said, well, 200 more what I was saying. So I just got tired of the whole game. I said, I'm going to see if the platforms are right. Put price on them, and I've been delighted so far to this point. So
the $50 thing is a funny thing because they're putting $50 out there because in their mind they're going to go up to 100. They think you bought it for $10, you're going to make 10 times your money.
Right.
You're going to take $100.
Exactly.
But of course, it's not happening.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. Aside from the charity work, the reason that you're here, what is it about? I mean, you've been in this industry a long time now. What is it about this industry that you really love still today, that attracts you to it, that you would point to?
To the industry?
Yeah, just what do you love about being in this industry, whether it's the people or the lifestyle? What is it you love about it?
Well, it's obviously gambling. So, I'm playing every day. I actually am one of the people who would go to Las Vegas and Atlantic City and never spend a cent gambling. I'd spend money. I'd give it to my wife to gamble, whatever, but I would never gamble myself. But it's because I gamble for a living, and it's a very high stakes, and it's very stressful and takes a lot of time. So, it's good for somebody like me who doesn't sleep much, drinks a lot of coffee, and likes to keep my brain occupied. It's a gamble. And really, I haven't really been paid enough yet. So, I think I'm gambling for the jackpot for later, when Alibaba calls.
And you never know, that could happen.
If they're smart, they should, because I own the assets. There's no way to get to them without paying me.
Right. Pay the man. That's where that slogan came from. Is there anything else we should cover before we go today? That's to me, it's been really fascinating and filled in some gaps that I had too. But we could take the rest of the afternoon. I don't know if people would stay with us or not.
No, I really appreciate it. You did fabulous. I really appreciate your help and sort of highlighting the most salient details of our history in this industry together. I just didn't really ask you about the holidays or whatever. And after that, I'll do my domain name training.
All right, that sounds good. I'll stick around and watch that then.
Did you guys have a good time for Christmas and New Year's?
It was great. Yeah, the holidays were really good. With pandemic, we didn't go anywhere. We did have Diana's sister came over. She had been quarantining as well, so we were all pretty safe there. It was different, but it's one of I just feel blessed and thankful that we've gotten through this thing healthy, and that we've had a safe place to hunker down. Looking forward to now that we've gotten some vaccines going around out there sooner or later. We're going to get this thing behind us, just like the Spanish flu ended. It's been disastrous, obviously, and my hearts go out to everyone who's sick or even or the deaths from it, which is crazy. But God willing, we'll get through it, and we'll all be seeing each other in person again. And I wish everyone out there the best New Year ahead, good health, happiness, and I hope 21 will be their best yet. And you too.
Right. Yeah, thank you so much. I agree with all those sentiments, and I really appreciate everything from you today and in the industry in general. And I'll talk to you very soon.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Ron. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Ron is great. My bed's not supposed to be in the picture. There we go. So we're going to do live domain name training. And if you guys put good domains on there, I will teach you how to appraise them. If you didn't put them on there, then I'm going to go from my own list. So since I don't see anything yet, I'm going to find my list and start some domain training. So keeping in mind that we're looking for 3 main characteristics. We're trying to disambiguate the name, figure out what it means, kind of think about it a little bit, what it means to the economy and society and the current business trends, for example. And then we're trying to find out the breadth, how many potential buyers are there, and then the depth. What's the deepest buyer? Who's got the most money? Who might pay me the most? That's really indicating what that thing is worth. So let me get a better list of domains up here in 1 second here, and we're going to be in good shape. Okay, so the first domain I'm going to do here is socialmediacenter.com. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys and hit Google as our tool to appraise this domain, Social Media Center. Uh-oh. That's not going to work. Hold on a second. So sorry. Got to figure out the best way to do this. It's going to only take me 1 second. Chrome tab. New tab. Okay, so we're going to appraise Social Media Center. We always use Boolean, even though Google doesn't know how to do Boolean properly. And they have no competitors. There's no customer service. There's no way to get it done properly. It's called a monopoly. Illegal. Supposedly they do no evil is their slogan, but they kind of lost that. It's like Animal Farm. You know, all animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. So Social Media Center, we're in good luck here. It's worth a ton because you can see there's 10 million results in Google. So thank goodness for that because I own it. So again, what does it mean? You know, we know what it means basically. We need to understand who it means it for. That would be the breadth. So that's our next effort here. We're going to scroll a little bit and see what's going on here. And then we go to the images, pictures worth 1,000 words. Try to focus on the images and look for logos, slogans, brand names, trademarks, sides of trucks, you know, whatever, something that's solid, that's a business brand as opposed to just a word. So again, we can see this is in uppercase here, meaning it's a real entity, real enterprise, as opposed to just a bunch of words. So right off the bat, we know this is a fabulous name because there's so many search results. And again, they're uppercase here, or not uppercase, but they start with uppercase letters, whatever that expression is. So it's a great name. We're going to do the images. So we know there's a ton of breadth. The question is, what's the depth? Like, who's really using this thing? Well, business grow, consult tech. Again, we're looking for Fortune 500 companies using it is the best thing we can hope for. This is Social Media Command Center from Salesforce, pretty darn close. So again, that's what we're looking for, Fortune 500 using that expression. But it's mostly vague hits. So I would say it has a ton of breadth, but only a little bit of depth so far, because we're not finding a ton of huge although this is Boeing, so I guess I just changed my mind. It has breadth and depth. So it's worth a ton. It's a long name, so we have to discount it for being so long. And again, ultimately, we make up a price. I've done the most appraisals and the most sales of anybody, so I get to decide the prices. Although I respect other people's opinions, but at the end of the day, the market maker makes the prices. So this is incredibly valuable, but long. So we're going to discount it to take that into account. You know, 50,000 would be too much because it's so long. 25,000 would be too cheap because it's such a great name. And therefore, socialmediacenter.com is worth 30,000. Okay, thank you very much. Let's see what else you guys have here. Alistair has stock mentorship. That sounds pretty good. Let's check that out. So what does it mean? It means you teach somebody about how to use stock trading on Wall Street. Unfortunately, it has extremely few results in Google, so he's hosed, although it sounds like a cool domain, but you have to have the support from the industry, from Google and from the marketing community. Here it sort of does, but it's not an exact expression. You see, stock trading mentorship program could be shortened to stock mentorship, but it's not. Could be, but it's not. Google shortened it, but the actual company using it isn't using that precise phrase. So you're looking for precise matches, and we're just not finding them. And again, there's not a lot of hits. We know what it means. The breadth is very light, and the depth is very shallow. So it's really not worth very much. It sounds really cool though, so it gets some value for sounding cool. And it's easy to spell, it means something. So, you know, there's definitely some value to that. So if it wasn't such a cool name, it should only be valued at $500 based on what we see in Google. But it is a really cool name. And just based on that fact, it's a really cool name. It's a COM. We know what it means. It's easy to spell. The minimum for anything like that is $2,000. So it's really a good job technically, because you could buy a domain like this for really cheap, but it's actually worth $2,000. You could probably buy it for $10 on a different market, not from here or from there. So let's see what else you guys have going on here. AmericanFight.com, Toronto State Law, Electrolytic. I don't know what that means. I guess I should try that. Josie has Fishin' Freaks. I'll try Fishin' Freak. That sounds pretty good. Thomas says Carry Hook. Well, that's good. You guys did a good job, except for Steven put in a .pro, which of course I'm not going to appraise that. It's not worth anything. Fishin' Freak we're doing first. Thank you. We basically know what it means already. And they're trying to correct the spelling, but you could do that just to analyze a related word to understand the depth. But really, the word is the word. It has to be an exact match. But you can see people use that expression in commerce. Here's a Facebook page. If we had more time, we could look at how many followers they had and if they have posted in the last week. If it's a real site that does commerce, that has money, we could drill down and look at all these, but we just don't have time at the moment. The good news is there's a lot of exact matches here. We know what it means. It's actually alliteration, which is cool, F and F. And it's also slang, which could be bad because you need two names. You'd need to buy both, Fishing Freak and Fishin' Freak. Plus there's the plural of both, Fishin' Freaks, Fishing Freaks. So it's way diluted there because there's 4 expressions that mean the identical thing, basically. And then there's a bunch of other related ones. Like the word, you don't necessarily have to use the word freak, but irrespective of that, it's a cool name. We know what it means. We can see a good number of hits and activity here in Google that's spelled the same way, but it's only 2,600 hits right there. That's not a lot. So this is some site, 133 followers. That's nothing. So it's kind of like the last name where like there's no support for it on Google, barely, but we can see it's a really cool name. And again, using alliteration gives it a premium. Sounding cool, being easy it's easy to spell to the extent you can hear what the person says, Fishin' Freak. But if you heard fishing, it's not so easy to spell. You'll spell it with a G. So diluted, 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 basically the same as the last one. It's worth $2,000 for the same reasons. $2,000. It's like Antiques Roadshow. Bam. Thank you very much. Let's see what else you guys have going on here. AmericanFight.com. Do I really want to appraise that? Hopefully there won't be gross pictures. So it has a lot of results. American Fight Directors. I have no idea what that's about. Again, a nonprofit organization. I talk about doing charity work. There's a lot of nonprofits that aren't really charities. They do art, which is great, and there's nothing bad about it, but it's not the type of charity I do. We're talking about serving the sick and the poor. Organizations, 501c3. These guys could be 501c3, but it doesn't make them a charity. It makes them a nonprofit. In any case, back to the subject at hand, American Fight System. So the question is, what does it mean? It means all kinds of stuff. These people are fighting over the American language, the English language. American Fight Clubs, American Fight Sports, Fight for Freedom. So that's cool. I mean, as far as disambiguating it, it's easy to spell and say. We don't actually know what it means, which is bad. But on the other hand, it means multiple things, which is good because any one of them could have some sort of value attributed to it. and whichever one is the most value is ultimately what gets the price for the domain. So the breadth is, since it means 3 different things, 4 different things, it has a lot of breadth. Each area could have its own potential interested parties. So it's way cool. And then the depth is not so great because, well, let's see. Let's look at images and see if there's a lot of logos. Okay, it is so great. I'm wrong again. Again, this is how you make money on domains, is you see something like this on a list somewhere. You can buy it for 20 bucks, 50 bucks, 100 bucks. Then you do an appraisal, which again, a minute ago, I wasn't very excited about. And now all of a sudden I can see there's this American Fight League, American Fight Directors, spelled the exact same way. I don't know what it has to do with BLM. Oh, I guess, I don't know what the hell that is, but in any case, Fight Directors. So the answer is that it has a bit of depth, not a ton. It's a little bit long, but it's not too long. Pretty easy to say, pretty easy to spell. You could have plural American fights. Also, you could just use US, USA. You don't have to use the word American. So again, those are dilutive factors to take into account. So ultimately, we have to pick a price. And I go through this little thing where I say, I go high and low, and until I find myself a medium point that makes sense. So we can do that with this name, American Fight. Is it worth 50,000? Definitely not. Is it worth 5,000? Maybe. Is it worth 10,000? Maybe. Worth 15? Definitely not. It's too, so it's not that great. So let's say between 5 and 10,000 to look at for a minute. We have these guys right here. I'd say 10,000 is fair. American Fight, 10,000. Straight to you from Antiques Roadshow. It's probably an antique domain. Hey, cool. So we'll do a couple more and then everybody's going to the beach. I actually have calls the rest of the afternoon, so I'm just dreaming, but I don't know. You guys put a bunch of bad ones on there. I'm going to pull some from my list so we can get some high numbers. Okay, I'll do theriverside.com. I could have looked at that pull down menu. The Riverside Church, the Riverside Incident. So keep in mind, there's a city that's medium large in California called Riverside, but the Riverside could mean, you know, the side of the river. It doesn't have to be, you know, capital like that. So the Riverside, well, I bet there's a lot, it looks like there's a lot of restaurants called Riverside, but I bet some of them are the Riverside. Restaurants by the side of the river. Riverside Inn, you know, it's a tiny thing, but so what does it mean? It's kind of a hotel. I mean, that's where we're coming down here. It's a hotel by the side of a river. It might mean other stuff also, and it might mean things related to Riverside, California. But ultimately, hotels have a lot of money, and it looks like there's a lot of these hotels called the Riverside. So that's our buyer. So we kind of know what it means. It could mean a couple of different things. It's the name of a movie, apparently, or that's actually a band, the Riverside Folk. That actually seems to be the highest number of hits in here. So it means, oh, here, this is better. The Riverside Company is a global investment firm, leading private capital options. Okay, bingo. So this is where the action is. But again, they're not called the Riverside. They're called Riverside or Riverside Company. It says the Riverside Company, but they're not known as the Riverside. So this actually doesn't have any value there. But the breadth is that it's got a decent breadth, bunch of hotels and a few other things, bands, the Riverside Convention Center. Well, again, that's actually Riverside. They just put the word the in front of it, but that wouldn't be their domain name. And so the depth is pretty deep because there's a bunch of big companies that are trading. And here we go. This is the best one. This is actually using the exact expression, the Riverside. Experience is too long. I don't want to see that thing. I don't even know how to get rid of it. Perspective investment opportunities, technical, okay, so it's got a lot of depth. We know what it means. It's got a good amount of breadth. So it's a very valuable domain. Oh, coincidentally, I own it. It's always good news. Worth $30,000 any day of the week. Thank you very much. Okay, one more and then beach. What'd you guys give me? Mark, he likes when I do the expensive ones. Okay, I have two here. Josie has Florida Connection. Mark has passionate.com, which of course I should charge him a fortune for, but we'll just do it for fun. Okay, we're going to do passionate.com. So again, we know what it means, of course. And it could be an adult site, which hopefully we're not going to find by accident because I have an adult filter on. So hopefully nothing gets through it. Passionate. So again, the breadth is any kind of adult company, clothing company, a movie, you know, all kinds of stuff. Great name in the dictionary, 452 million results in Google. I mean, again, it's very serious. You want to look in the images, a lot of activity here. Again, to do this correctly would take a lot of time, but you know, just right off the bat, you can just start through your tiered system. So again, is passionate.com worth $1 million? Wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think anybody will pay it. So worth 500,000. Yeah, but still people won't pay it because they're cheap, and you know, you could buy better names for 500,000 actually that are worth millions. But the answer is it's just incredibly valuable. It's hard to come up with a good answer. I don't really have the data on the traffic, or you know, I didn't do enough research. But having said that, it's definitely worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. We know that much. It's not worth $1 million, and it's worth more than 100,000. So that gets us started. I mean, if I owned it, I'd list it for 400,000 and sell it for 200,000. And there we have it. Oh, I promised we would do Josie one more here, and then we're done. When Josie comes home, so good, she's the pride of the neighborhood. Florida Connection. It's a good name. I live in Florida. Again, what does it mean? I mean, everybody's traveling to Florida constantly through every sorts of means of travel. Or if you're already in Florida, you could connect in Florida, intra connection, Florida Connection, or inter through other states and countries through any means of transportation, or within Florida, each of which could be Florida Connection. Plus you have organizations that are already called Florida Connection, I'd be willing to bet. So again, we're going to go find out Florida Connection, and then we're done. Okay, so what is Florida Connection here? Florida Connection Academy, Florida Connection Rentals. So we see Academy is a big thing in property. So there's already two organizations. One's an academy and one's a real estate organization. But again, you could start any new thing, specifically related to travel. Anything in the travel industry would be well served. Particularly good name because it'll just never lose value. Could always start a new company called Florida Connection. There's all this Facebook stuff already. And this is a perfect example of a great investment. Somebody could buy a domain like this for relatively cheap, and it's actually worth a lot. So what does it mean? You know, it means a variety of things, mostly related to travel and transportation. Easy to say, easy to spell. It has a kick to it. It sounds like a real name and a real company, and sounds like something people would want to pay money for. So those are all excellent signs. Florida is a great place, a rising economy, a lot of new companies moving down here. I think Goldman Sachs is moving down here, potentially to Boca, I'm not sure. So it's cool. The breadth is a lot of breadth. The depth is a lot of depth. Again, there's a lot of companies that could use it, and the one that needs it is the one with the most money should pay up. So it's another case of a good domain investment where you could probably buy it for cheap, but it's actually worth a lot of money. $15,000. Awesome. This was like the greatest session with Ron and our domain appraisals. You guys are the best. Appreciate everything so much from my audience here. This thing is going to be saved on YouTube, so you can share it and watch it later if you're interested. And next week, I have Divyank Turkaya. Hopefully I say his name correctly. And he is the man. He's like the smartest guy we know, the best businessman, the most successful businessman. He has the most fun of anybody I've ever seen. So Divyank's next Wednesday. You know, Ron knows him really well. And, you know, he's the most successful person who came out of the whole domain name industry. And there's a ton of very successful people, but Divyank's literally a billionaire from doing these deals and selling his company. And I really don't know all the stuff he does, so we're going to ask him next week. So again, thanks for everything. Join us next week, and we'll talk to you guys soon.